Hey there, Calvin here. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a super simple platformer within the game engine GameMaker. Now, if you don't know what the game engine GameMaker is, it's a pretty simple game engine that you can use. While it's simple, it's definitely really powerful. Many indie games have been made with it. The most notable of the bunch is probably Hyperlight Drifter, Forager, and Undertale. Those games have all been made using this engine, GameMaker. And it's a very nice engine. However, it is paid, but it does have a 30-day free trial, so you can follow along with me just to check out if you want to use this engine for good, if you actually want to figure out how to use it and actually use it as your main engine. I have touched on engines like Unity before, not on this channel, but in real life. I'm not too fond of Unity. I have used GameMaker for a long time though, nearly 2 years. So the aim of this video is just to teach you how to set up your own little platforming game. Now this video, it wasn't actually my idea. It was a suggestion in a stream by one of my viewers, Lord of Carnage. He said, go do a platformer tutorial for GameMaker. And I said, okay, sure. So to get started, what you'll need to do is you'll actually need to get GameMaker. You can get that from the Yo-Yo Games website, www.yoyogames.com/GameMaker. There should be a link in the description, unless I forgot about it, in which case you can just copy the text from here, or you can just search up GameMaker in your browser. So after you do that, you'll just want to register for Yo-Yo Games, and you'll just want to download the 30-day free trial. There shouldn't be too much of an issue doing that. So once you've actually installed GameMaker Studio, you'll be brought to this screen here. So this is just our little like launch center is where we can do whatever we want. Now you won't have access to a couple of things if you're using the 30-day free trial, such as you won't have access to imports or the marketplace at least. So we'll want to get started. We'll click New File, and we're going to create a new project with the GameMaker language. We're not going to use drag and drop. Drag and drop is powerful, but it's not as versatile as GameMaker, as GML. So we'll use GML, and we're going to create another. It should redirect you to your Documents folder with your GameMaker Studio 2 thing. So I have tried this out before. It's really simple. I've created a couple of games with it. My most notable one is Aspen. So we'll want to create a new folder in here. I'm going to call this Tutorial Platformer. So we're going to navigate into the folder. Wrong folder. We're going to navigate into the Tutorial Platformer folder, and I'm just going to call this My First Game. And we're going to save as type GameMaker Studio 2 project.yyp. So we'll click save, and we'll be redirected to the workspace here. And I'm just going to click Control S to save real quick. So we are now in our workspace for GameMaker. This is where we get all our stuff done, where we create all our sprites. You don't have to create your sprites in here. I don't really do that. It's where we're going to program our stuff. It's where we're going to add our fonts. We're going to do our shaders. But we're just touching on the bare minimum here. I don't even know if I want this to be a series, but if you do want it to be a series, do go tell me in my Discord or in the comments. I wouldn't mind doing a series. It would be a fun learning experience for both of us. So what we'll want to do is we'll want to expand this Rooms tab here in the hierarchy, and we're going to rename it to RM Test. It's just a naming convention of mine. We're going to navigate into it by double-clicking, and then we can see our room is kind of like a square. It's not like a 19/6 ratio. That's kind of annoying, but we can fix that. We're going to set our room settings. I'm going to change the width and height to 320 by 180. This will be a pixelated tutorial, a pixelated platformer tutorial. You could up the room size, but I mean, for your first game, I would probably just follow along. So we're going to change the width and height here, and now what we're going to do is we're going to open this Viewports and Cameras tab, and then we're going to scroll down. We're going to click Enable Viewports. We're going to click Viewport 0 here, and we're going to say Visible. And now if we scroll out, we can see that we have a huge white box that is the same of our previous room. That is the size of our previous room settings. So now what we're going to do is we're going to change the camera properties to match the room width and height. So in my case, we're going to say 320 for width, and for height, we're going to say 180. Once we're done with that, it will automatically set itself. And now for our viewport properties. Since I'm on a 1920 by 1080 monitor, I'm going to set this to 1280 by 720. This will set the size of our actual game window so that it doesn't become a really minuscule window of that's about the size of 320 pixels and 180 pixels. We don't want that. But if you're using a 4K monitor, go for like 1920 by 1080 so that it fills up your screen. 1280 by 720 really does look small in a 4K monitor. So now that we're done with that, we're going to rename our instances layer. We're going to click F2. We're going to name it LYR objects. And we're going to click our background click our background layer, and we're going to click color. And we're going to just change it to a nice sky blue if you want. So basically, layers are where we put all our assets into a room. I like the room editor of GameMaker. It's very intuitive. It's not the same as Unity or Unreal Engine. Haven't touched on Godot before, but I don't think it's the same. So anyways, we have multiple layer types. We can add folders too. So we can have an asset layer. We can also have path layers for like preset paths for objects to follow. We can also have a tile layer, which are just images. We can also have an instance layer. We can also have a background layer like this one. So with all that done, I'm going to navigate to the objects layer, and I'm going to click this one. It's the grid options. I'm going to set it to 16 over 16. So actually not 16 over 16, 8 over 8. So this is what we'll be making the size of our tiles / walls, and our player is also going to be this size too. So we'll navigate back to the workspace. I'm going to minimize this tab and maximize this tab. This is just our output / console. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to create a couple sprites. I'm going to create 2. So I'll have sprite 0 and sprite 1. Now, obviously, I don't want to keep the names for these sprites because they're pretty not so fun names. These are just GameMaker default names. So I'm going to call this sprite, I'm going to call this S-Player. So for our player sprite, we have a couple things to do. I'm going to close all these big windows so we can see better. So for this, we have a couple things to do. We're going to actually change this tab to say middle center, and that will change our sprite origin, where the center of our sprite is, or where we want to draw from. So I'm going to lock that, and it'll be in our middle center. Now we're going to preview our mask, just to see what our mask is. We can see a tiny dot there. That's not what we want. So we're going to actually change this size. We're going to change this to 8 over 8, and now this is an 8x8 sprite. I'm going to click Edit Image, and we're going to get fancy with our painting. I'm not really too much of an artist, so I'll see what I can do. Maybe this guy can have a really stale face. I like it. So he's going to be pink, and he's going to have a really stale face. He's like, I don't know anymore. So if we navigate back to here, we can see that his sprite has actually updated, and we can click Preview Mask, and we can see that his entire thing is grayed out. Now, what this is this actually just shows our collision mask. If we, you might have noticed this tab, we can open it, and we can see our collision mask. So there's modes for this. We can say full image just to get the entire image. We can say automatic just to for GameMaker to find the best size for your thing, or just like the minimum size that you have. Now we also have types of like collision masks. I'm gonna leave it at rectangle automatic. You don't really need to change anything. But now we're gonna go on to sprite 1, and we're gonna rename this. We're gonna call this S solid. S solid snake. Anyways, we're gonna click size. We're gonna change this to 8 over 8. We're gonna click apply, and we're gonna leave the sprite origin at top left. This will be for reasons I shall explain later. And we're gonna not check our collision mask. We're gonna click edit image, and we're gonna just make a simple wall object. I'm just gonna make like a little filled grid here. So that looks fine, I think. Now that we're done with that, I'm gonna minimize minimize all these tabs, or just close them all. We're actually done with everything we need to do for sprites, and we now have our sprites in the hierarchies over here. So I'm gonna I'm gonna create objects now. These objects are what actually do things in the game. They actually execute code, they actually draw things, they actually move around and run and stuff. So we're gonna create objects. I'm gonna call this object OSolid. And then we're gonna change the sprite index of OSolid to SSolid. So we have assigned a sprite to OSolid, and that is all we need to do. There doesn't need to be any code in our wall object, since it is just a thing that is there to collide with our player. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create another object. We're going to call this OPlayer. So this will be our player object, uncoincidentally, and we're going to get the sprite index. We're going to set that to sPlayer. So now we have our actual player object, which will run around and just traverse this world, our very empty world, and it'll do all the fun things that we want it to do. So now that that's done, we're going to click add event. So we're going to give it an event to actually work with. So we're going to give it a create event. Now this is where we'll actually write our code and stuff. So a create event, if you don't know what that is, it's an event where it runs all the code in this right at the start of the game. It only runs it once, so you can use this for initializing stuff as well. So I'm going to set the description, so triple slashes at desk, and I call this initialize variables. So once that's done, we can actually get on with initializing the variables, just declare our variables and stuff that we actually want to use for the game. We're going to basically make our own physics engine. Now that might sound pretty daunting, but don't worry, it's very, very simple. GameMaker makes it all really simple. While GameMaker does have its own built-in physics engine, it's not something we really want to use for a game as simple as this. So anyways, I'm going to create a couple of bars. We're going to create the horizontal speed var, hori speed, and we're going to set that to 0. Another thing about GameMaker is that you don't have to declare what type of variable you're making. You don't need to type bool, you don't need to type int, you don't need to type string. You don't need to do any of that. You see the syntax highlighting there, but that is for functions. Functions show up as orange, so bool is a function. Anyways, next we're going to do vertical speed. We'll set that to 0. Then we're going to do move speed. Move speed. And we're going to set move speed to 2. So our guy will move at 2 pixels per second. Not per second, per frame. So actually, we want to check what our game framer is. We'll go to game options, and you can see game frames per second here. Mine is default to 60, but yours might be at 30. So you want to change this to 60 frames per second to get the best FPS out of it. So anyways, now that we have move speed, we're gonna set jump speed to equal 7. Now this is how fast we'll jump, or how high or how fast, it doesn't really matter. Now we're going to set our gravity speed, grav speed. It doesn't really need to be speed, you could just say grav. We'll say just grav. Grav is equal to 1. So our guy will be affected by gravity with a strength of 1, which is just 1 pixel. And we'll say max grav is equal to 3. So those are our variables that we'll be using. Now I'll head back into the workspace. I'm going to navigate back to our player. And we can see a description here. That's basically what this lovely little thing does. We can change this to say potato, and then it will become potato. I'm just gonna leave out potato because I kind of like potato. Anyways, we're gonna add an event. We're gonna say step, and we're gonna click step. So basically, what the step event is this all this code runs once every frame of the game. So if you have your game, it's basically just a thing that constantly updates. I'll just leave it at that. So we're going to set the description for this. I'm going to say at desk player main event, and we're going to say movement as well, because this is how we're going to control all our players' movement. So we're going to make more variables. We're going to say comment keyboard bars. This is basically where we're going to say declare all the variables for our keyboard and how we're actually going to detect input. So first thing that we want to do is we're going to create a variable k left, and we're going to set equals to, we're going to open brackets, and we're going to put minus before the brackets, and then at the front of the brackets we'll also want to put a semicolon to end off the line, basically to tell the computer to stop to just end that line there and continue to the next one. GameMaker doesn't actually need semicolons, but it is good practice, especially for basically every language except Python. I don't know what other language doesn't use semicolons. Right, assembly. Assembly is the language that doesn't use semicolons. So anyways, we're going to say keyboard underscore check. That basically just checks to see if we're holding down a key. So we're going to type in vk underscore left. Now, this will just check to see if we're pressing down our left arrow key. and it will set k left to either be true or false. And so basically keyboard check just returns a boolean, which is either true or false, and then I'll set k left to equal true or false. And then, but you might be wondering, hey, I want to use WASD, what would I do for that? We can get rid of this, and we can say ORD, and we can say, we can put 2 quotation marks, and we can say A. So A is like left on the WASD control scheme. ORD just converts the letter into a readable state for keyboard check. Now you might also be wondering, oh, wait a minute, I want to use both of them. How would we do that? So for that, it's super simple. We'll just go to this bracket, and we'll say OR. We'll say OR keyboard underscore check, and then we'll say VK underscore left. Now that will check to see if we're pressing A or left. It'll do both. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to remove OR, and I'm going to put 2 vertical lines. Vertical lines in programming, it literally just translates to OR as well. That is completely fine. You can also do the same with AND, but instead of AND, you could also type in 2 ampersands. For NOT, you could also put an exclamation mark. Exclamation mark translates to NOT, and for sans translates to and the 2 vertical lines translates to OR. That's good stuff to know, good stuff to know. So next we're going to do our K right. It's basically the same, except we're going to leave out the brackets and the minus this time. We're just going to say keyboard underscore check, and then we'll put brackets, and we'll say ORD, and then we'll put two I don't know, quotation marks. We'll put D, and I'll also put OR keyboard underscore check VK underscore right. So now we have it checking to see whether we're pressing left or right. Now what we want to do is we're going to do a jump key. We're going to say K jump is equal to keyboard underscore check, but we're not going to say underscore check. We're going to say underscore check pressed. Now I'll basically check to see if we actually click it. It's not going to check if we click it once, because that would be really inconsistent. It basically works the exact same, except it only sets it once, and then it'll set it again after you release and press it down again. So then with that done, we'll just say keyboard check underscore press. I'm going to put ORD, and then I'm going to put 2 brackets. I'm going to say Z, capital Z. Always make sure that they're capitals, otherwise it won't work. I'm just going to put capital Z because I like the keyboard control scheme, but say you also want to do the WASD, we can say OR, and then keyboard underscore check underscore pressed, and then we'll say open brackets, and we'll say VK underscore space. Remember to end off your lines with semicolons. And now it's time to actually get our player to move and collide. We'll say move is equal to K left plus K right. So basically it'll set move to equal either -1, 0, or 1. So since this returns a boolean, true is 1 in machine code, and false is 0 in machine code, I believe. So basically we can use that those zeros and ones to actually make our player move. We can say move is equal to 0 or -1, and such and so on. And now what we can do is we can say hori speed is equal to move times, and times is an asterisk in programming. Move times move speed. There we go. So basically, horizontal speed will just equal 1 times our move speed. And since 1 times 2 is 2, it'll set hori speed to 2. But it'll also set it to -2 if it's this is equal to -1. So that's basically how we get our character to move, and why we need to have that to say minus. So now we're going to actually get our player to get affected by gravity. We can say if grav SPD is less than, no, not grav SPD, vert speed is less than our, I don't know, our max grav. Yeah. So basically, it'll just check to see if we're going down at a speed less than maximum gravity, and if it does reach that cap, it'll just stop running like this code. So we'll say vert SPD is plus equal to grav SPD. So let me just check. It seems to have not got grav speed, or right. Okay. Right, this needs to say, I forgot, this should be gravity. And then we'll lose the warning. That's very useful sometimes. K-jump, it's just giving us that because we haven't actually used K-jump, so you don't need to worry about that. So now, we're actually going to create another variable up here. We're going to call this variable onGround, just to check if we're actually on the ground or not. So that so imagine like, I'm going to make this like a little platform here. So, and then the cursor will be the player. Let's say if the player jumps, he does it normally, right? But if the player walks off and then jumps, he can still jump. And it's kind of trippy. We don't want that to happen. So we'll say onGround is equal to place_meeting. And we'll put open brackets and we'll say x and then y plus 1. And then we'll say solid. And basically what this will do is it will check to see if we're actually touching the solid object that we made, but we're above it. So it'll either if we're touching it or if we're above it. And then that basically sets onGrounds to equal true, which is useful for situations like this, where we don't want our player to be able to jump all the time just by spamming the spacebar. So we're going to save that variable for later when we actually get to it, which is right now. We'll say if kjump, and then here we can actually use the onGround variable. We can say and then onGround. If you don't like the ampersands here, you can just say and. It doesn't really matter. GameMaker will accept both, but just don't use both at the same time. You can use both in the same line, as in like yada yada yada, and then and. But don't put them right next to each other. That's just bound to get things. That's just bound to muck things up. So now we'll say vert. We'll say vert SPD is equal to minus jump speed. Boom, and that'll just launch us into the air. Oh, right, that needs to be a capital S, and then I'll stop throwing us an error. Not an error, a warning. There's a big difference. It just warns us that, hey, that might not be an actual variable, since like I haven't seen it declared before. So anyways, with that done, we can actually get to collision now. This exciting stuff, collision. It's super simple. We don't need to worry about anything. We'll say collision for our comments. We'll say horizontal. This will be our horizontal collision. Now this is really simple. We're going to use the place meeting function here to check if we're touching this thing again. So we're going to say if place_meeting, if place_meeting is x plus h hori speed, hori SPD, and then we'll say y plus no, not y plus anything. We'll just say y, and then we'll just say solid. Nice. And then we're gonna open some brackets here and just leave it there. Now it was throwing us an error because we hadn't actually put the brackets, or there wasn't any code in front of it, but now we don't need to worry. So basically what this actually does is it checks to see if we're about to like touch a actual solid on the left and right of us. So we'll say x plus hori speed just to check 2 pixels ahead or behind of us at all times, just to prepare us for actually colliding. This is how we get a pixel perfect collision. Pixel perfect. So we'll say next we want to get in a while loop. While loops are pretty finicky. If you use them right, they can be very useful, but if you use them wrong, you can freeze your game and it won't move at all. But this won't freeze the game if we do it correctly. So we'll say place_meeting x plus cyan, and then we'll open more brackets and we'll go back and we'll say hori speed, and then we'll add a comma and we'll say y, and then we'll say solid. Open more brackets, and then what we'll say is x plus equals cyan, and then we will say hori speed, and then we exit the brackets, and then we say hori speed is equal to 0 just to stop the player. And that is the collision for the horizontal. That is our horizontal collision all in one. Now for our vertical, we don't have to do anything. We can just copy this, and then we just have to replace a bunch of stuff. Get rid of hori speed here, and then we'll change this to, you guessed it, vert SPD, and then get rid of this too, and then we'll say y plus cyan vert SPD. Boom. And then we'll get rid of y here. We'll actually change that to y, and then plus equals sign vert SPD. So I don't know if you know this, but what plus equals does is that it just adds something onto something. So we'll say vert SPD there. So basically, saying plus equals is exactly the same as saying it's exactly the same, but just a shorter way of saying y equals y plus vert SPD or something like that. So I like using plus equals since it's shorter. But now that we're done with that, the last thing that we need to do is two very simple lines of code. We'll say x plus equals hori SPD equals that, and y plus equals vert SPD. And then you're completely done with all the code you need for your actual player. Alrighty, up next, all we're going to do is we're going to head into our test room. And we've already made our layer objects and we've already set up stuff. So what we can do is we can get straight to level building. We can take our solid object and we can press and hold, we can select it and press and hold Alt to paint with the object. Basically just drop tons of instances onto it. You can drag and drop, but it is slow and I don't like that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a ground, just a basic ground thing here. And I'm gonna also make a little border around here so that we can not fall out the edge of the world. And then what we're gonna do is I'm gonna make a little platform here, maybe 3 high. I think that's how high our player can jump. Add a couple platforms here for our guy to jump on. Yep, that looks about right. And then we'll maybe add a 1 here too. Oops. 3, and then we can go 3, and then we can go 3. Maybe 4, that seems a bit much. So if you want to box select stuff, you can hold shift and then drag, and you'll have a box selector. It's useful for moving stuff. Oh, also, if you're wondering why your thing's not going at like a pixel perfect, you should probably put snap on if you're having that problem. So that's basically level design. You don't really need anything much more epic than this. So I'm just gotta drop a player right in the middle. That's 2 players. I'll drop a player right there. Okay. All right, now that we have the player there, we can do our fun thing. We can actually run the game. So you just click it, and they'll start building. Now, if everything goes well, yep, we can see that he has collided with the walls. Pixel perfect. Yep, everything's looking good. And we can jump, get onto stuff. Yep, up we go. Like movement's feeling a bit strange, but you can tweak it easily. It's just a simple game. So we could also use the space bar and the A and D keys to move now as well. It's what I'm using to move right now, and now I'm using the arrow keys. Everything's going well, and when you fall off, you can't double jump, you can't triple, quadruple jump. So everything's working well, and that is the basic premise for a super simple platformer. Now this is basically the beginnings to any platformer. This isn't necessarily the only way to go about it, but it is one of the most common. It's the one I used. So anyways, if you enjoyed the video, just let me know if you want this to be a continuation of a series. I would really love to continue this. This would be a ton of fun to go over. You can see I got stuck there. That is something that we can fix as well. But anyways, if you want me to continue this series, I definitely wouldn't mind. Just let me know in my Discord or on the comments. I would definitely love to, as I said before, do a continuation of the series, and we could actually get a proper game going and get levels in, maybe a level selector too. That'd be quite fun, and a fun learning project for both of us too. You'll learn how to do GML, and I'll learn how to actually structure tutorial videos for GameMaker. So with all that said, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit the like button, and if you really loved it, do consider subscribing. Helps the channel out and me personally. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.